She smells like pig manure. My cousin whispered it loud enough for the whole room to hear. A few snickers followed, bouncing off the marble walls of the Hastings estate. I didn't flinch. I sat there in my boots, still speckled with dried mud, my flannel shirt faintly carrying the scent of this morning's chores. They thought I was a joke, the farm girl who didn't belong. But Grandpa always said, they laugh loudest when they're most afraid of being seen. What they didn't know was that Grandpa had cameras running, that he'd seen everything, the sneers, the silence, the scorn. And what they really didn't expect? That I'd be the one inheriting everything. When the lawyer read my name, their smiles died. The room froze. And suddenly, it was them who didn't belong. I could feel the polished leather chairs shifting uncomfortably around me. No one made eye contact, not even when I smiled faintly and nodded a polite hello. I'd shown up 10 minutes early not to impress anyone, just out of habit. On the farm, if you're on time, you're late. The moment I stepped through the tall double doors of the estate, the scent of gardenias hit me artificial and heavy, clashing against the faint trail of hay and pig bedding still clinging to my boots. I didn't have time to change. Grandpa's pigs don't feed themselves, and I wasn't about to miss morning chores just because the family finally remembered I existed. Alexis, my cousin, wrinkled her nose and leaned into her fiancé. She could have at least showered, she muttered. Oh, I think she did in pig slop, he laughed. I ignored them. The long table was set like it was Christmas dinner, polished silverware, crystal glasses, and folded napkins that none of us would touch. But instead of a feast, the centerpiece was a mahogany box containing Grandpa's will and a silence so sharp it cut through silk. Uncle Todd wore a designer suit he probably bought for this very occasion. Aunt Karen's earrings glinted with tiny diamonds that caught the light just right, probably for the camera. Oh, yes, I noticed the camera crew tucked discreetly in the corner. Grandpa always did things by the book, but this felt theatrical. I took a seat near the end of the table, not at the very end, but close enough to feel like an afterthought. The chair wobbled slightly. No one offered me a cushion. Beside me, one of the younger cousins giggled and whispered, "Does she even own a real pair of shoes?" I pressed my hands together in my lap. I didn't look up. Not yet. My skin was flushed. Sure, embarrassment, frustration, maybe even fury. But I'd learned something important on the farm. Storms pass quicker when you stand still. The double doors creaked open again. Mr. Gallows, my grandfather's longtime lawyer, stepped in with his usual solemn gait. Tall, silver-haired, and unreadable. He looked like he'd been carved from salt. He set his briefcase down, adjusted his cuffs, and said simply, "Let's begin." And just like that, the game was in motion. I wasn't invited to play, not really, but I was already on the board. The reading began like a carefully choreographed ballet, every name, every asset delivered with a crisp cadence from Mr. Gallows' lips. It didn't take long for the room to settle into smugness. "To my son, Todd Thompson," the lawyer intoned, "I leave the lakefront cabin in Vermont, the Mercedes collection, and the wine cellar contents." Uncle Todd straightened his tie like he'd just been knighted. His wife, Karen, leaned in and whispered something into his ear. He smiled. I didn't care to know what she said. "To Alexis Marshall, my granddaughter, I bequeath the Paris flat and the personal jewelry vault, including the blue sapphire brooch belonging to my late wife." Alexis gasped. "The brooch? Oh my God." "Of course it's hers," Aunt Karen beamed. "It always belonged with someone refined." I clenched my jaw. Grandpa used to show me that brooch when I was little. He'd hold it to the sun so I could see the way the light broke into blues and purples. He never showed it to Alexis. But none of them knew that. The gifts kept coming. Real estate, stocks, antiques, boats. Each name called out like a validation stamp. "You are worthy. You are valued. You are loved." My name didn't come. My name didn't even echo in their imaginations. I heard someone chuckle. Then another cousin Derek piped up with a smirk. "Maybe she gets the manure pile. Best suited, right?" More laughter. Mr. Gallows didn't react. He just turned another page. I kept still. my hands folded in my lap like a child in Sunday service. You see, I wasn't surprised. They'd never hidden how they saw me. I was that farm girl. The one who stayed back to shovel stalls while they studied abroad. The one who wore flannel to family dinners instead of silk. The one who never quite looked like she belonged in a family photo. And yet, somehow, I never once missed Grandpa's birthday. When Aunt Karen's dog needed emergency care and no one else was home, I drove 4 hours to help and never got a thank you. When Grandma passed, I was the one who helped dress her for burial. I'd scrubbed her hands clean of dirt from the garden because I knew she would have hated to be remembered with dirty fingernails. But none of that counted. Not to them. Worth, in this room, wore cologne and high heels. It signed deals. It posted vacation photos. It didn't show up with mud on its boots and calloused hands. So when the lawyer cleared his throat again and paused, I knew something was coming. But they didn't. And that made all the difference. They thought they knew Grandpa. They saw the businessman, the landowner, the estate host with a handshake like granite, and a voice made for boardrooms. But they didn't know the man who used to sneak me peanut brittle during my chores, who once took me out to the pasture just to show me how the wind changes before a storm. They didn't know the man who let me paint wildflowers on the side of the barn and never told a soul. They didn't know about the cameras either. 3 summers ago, Grandpa called me into the tool shed, where the air smelled like cedar and grease. "I've got a little experiment," he'd said, tapping the table. "Help me set up these motion cameras." I blinked. "For what? Coyotes?" "No," he smiled, eyes crinkling. "For people." He placed a tiny black lens into my palm. "You learn a lot about folks when they think no one's watching, especially family." I didn't ask questions. I just helped him wire them discreet little things, tucked under the crown molding in the parlor, behind the books in the sitting room, and even in the chandelier over the dining table. At the time, it felt odd. Now it made perfect sense. I remembered one clip vividly. I'd stumbled on it while checking a storage drive for him. It was Aunt Karen, laughing to Uncle Todd after Christmas dinner. She actually brought sweet potatoes in a foil tray, like a buffet worker. I swear, sometimes I wonder if she's even part of this bloodline. They clinked glasses. That night, Grandpa had been quiet. He didn't say a word. But later, he left a folded napkin on my bedside table. On it, scribbled in his messy block letters, "Let them talk. Their noise is a gift. It tells you who they really are." I kept that napkin in my glove box for months. Now, watching the same people straighten their postures and sip water with tight lips, I realized something. They'd never known Grandpa. Not really. They'd known his presence, not his principles. His money, not his mind. That's why none of them noticed the slight glint of a camera lens tucked into the top corner of the chandelier above us. But I did. I knew every camera in this house. I helped him install most of them. Mr. Gallows flipped to the final page of the will. His voice shifted lower, slower, like something important had just arrived. "There is one final instruction, to be accompanied by a video message." He reached for the small remote. The screen behind him blinked to life. There he was. Grandpa. Wearing his faded flannel, the one with the stitched-up elbow I fixed when I was 14. He leaned slightly toward the camera. "If you're watching this," he said, voice warm but unmistakably clear, "then you're about to see what I saw, not in balance sheets or holiday cards, but in character." And just like that, the temperature in the room dropped. The game was over. And the truth was about to begin. The screen flickered once, then steadied. Grandpa sat behind his desk, hands folded. Not in a suit, just his worn-out barn shirt and that crooked ball cap that said, "Best Crop 2002, but his eyes were sharper than I'd ever seen them. "If you're sitting in that room," he began, "then you probably think you know what's coming. You've measured my worth by acres, stocks, and antiques, but let me tell you something." He leaned forward slightly. "A legacy isn't what you leave people. It's what you leave in people." You could have heard a fork drop. Uncle Todd shifted in his seat. Alexis's fiancé crossed his arms, suddenly less smug. Even Aunt Karen blinked fast, like the air had changed and she didn't know why. Most of you, Grandpa continued, spent more time polishing your image than showing up when it mattered. He paused. But one person always did. I knew it was coming, but still, my throat tightened. She never asked for anything. She showed up early, stayed late, and never once looked down on where she came from. She smelled like dirt because she earned it. Alexis scoffed. Is this supposed to be about Haley Thompson? The lawyer cut in, reading directly from the final page. By directive of Edward Charles Thompson, all remaining assets, including the main estate, farmland holdings, livestock operations, equipment, investment accounts, and the family trust are to be transferred to sole ownership and stewardship of Miss Haley Thompson. A silence fell so hard I felt it press against my skin. Then, chaos. What? Alexis screeched. Absolutely not, Aunt Karen snapped, turning to Mr. Gallows. That girl's not equipped to run a lemonade stand, let alone a trust. She's not even a real adult, Derek blurted. She still lives in a trailer. It's a modular farmhouse, I said, finally lifting my eyes. They all turned to stare at me, like I'd spoken a foreign language. Then Grandpa's voice returned on the screen, stronger now. I know some of you are angry. You think I've made a mistake, but I watched long enough to know who carried this family's values and who just posed with them. He looked into the camera like he was staring down each of them. I made my choice, he said, and you don't have to agree with it. You just have to live with it. The screen faded to black. I sat still. Boots on marble, mud on tile, and suddenly, I wasn't the one who didn't belong. They were. The room cracked open not with sound, but with disbelief. Aunt Karen's pearls rattled against her chest as she leaned forward. You can't be serious, she barked. This is emotional manipulation. Edward was old, confused. Someone must have pressured him. I was with him every Sunday, Uncle Todd added, voice tight. Haley didn't even live here. Alexis slammed her water glass down. This is a farm girl fantasy. You think shoveling pig crap makes you worthy of a legacy? I didn't flinch. I just looked at her makeup flawless, jaw quivering, manicured fingers gripping the table like it might steady her pride. I never asked for any of this, I said. But I didn't have to. He watched. You just never noticed. A beat passed. Then Mr. Gallows cleared his throat again. Per Mr. Thompson's request, there's one more file to be shown. It's marked private, but he instructed it be played publicly, if needed. He tapped the screen. A new video began. This one was different. It wasn't from a desk or a chair. It was from a handheld camcorder, shaky, raw, with Grandpa in a hoodie, standing in the barn. His voice was quieter, almost intimate. If this is being played, it means they're fighting you. He looked directly into the camera. Let them. He chuckled softly. They'll scream. They'll twist it. They'll even call it theft. But Haley, you don't owe them comfort. The footage shifted. Grandpa now standing next to me. Sometime last fall. We were loading feed bags. I was sweating, swearing under my breath. He turned to the camera, grinning. You see this? This is what legacy looks like. It doesn't wear heels. Someone behind me gasped. The camera panned toward Alexis and Derek, caught weeks ago gossiping on the back veranda, mocking Grandpa's memory. Honestly, once he's gone, I say we bulldoze the whole place and flip the land. Exactly, Derek had said. No one needs another hayfield in this family. The room froze. I turned slowly to look at them. Neither one could meet my eyes. Grandpa installed the cameras himself, I said. With my help. You, what? Uncle Todd breathed. Every corner of this house. He saw the smiles and the sneers. I stood, letting the chair creak behind me. He knew you'd try to discredit me, so he gave me more than land. He gave me proof. Mr. Gallows stepped in again. For the record, all documents have been reviewed by independent legal counsel. The estate transfer is binding and irrevocable. Aunt Karen's lips parted, but no sound came out. Alexis finally snapped. You think you can just waltz in here smelling like manure and own us? I let her words hang. Then I smiled, not in triumph, but in clarity. I don't want to own anyone, I said, but I will not shrink so you can stay tall. I reached into my bag and pulled out a sealed envelope. This, I said, laying it flat on the table, is the operational trust agreement Grandpa had me co-author 6 months ago. I've been shadow managing the farmland and the equipment vendors under a third-party LLC. While you were planning renovations for your Paris flat, Alexis, I was negotiating livestock subsidies. Silence. Pure. Sharp. No one laughed now. I earned this, I finished. With my hands, with my grit, with the part of him you all forgot he had soul. And then, for the first time that afternoon, I sat back. The lawyer nodded. No one said a word. Because what do you say? When the girl you mocked becomes the one holding every key? That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of victory, and definitely not out of joy. There's a strange silence that follows being seen for the first time. Like you've stepped out of a storm only to find that the world still hasn't noticed the mud on your boots has dried. I sat on the guest bed in the estate's east wing. The same room Grandma used to keep for visiting missionaries and unmarried cousins. The sheets smelled of starch and lavender, like someone had tried to erase time with laundry. My phone buzzed. 1:14 a.m. Alexis. We were all emotional. Grandpa wouldn't want this to come between us. Let's meet. 1:38 a.m. Uncle Todd. What happened back there was unexpected. If you need help managing the trust, I have experience. 2:03 a.m. Aunt Karen. Sweetheart, I think you may be overwhelmed. You should talk to someone, a financial advisor, a real one. And then 2:29 a.m. Grandpa's number lit up. My heart jumped just a little before I remembered. Of course, it wasn't him. It was the backup phone he'd given me months ago. In case the big ones stop listening, he'd said with a wink. I still hadn't deleted his contact. I let it ring once. Then silence again. They were scrambling now. Reaching out not because they missed me, but because I had something they wanted. But I remembered. I remembered all the years they ignored my birthday. The times they called me Mud Girl at Thanksgiving. The way Aunt Karen once left hand sanitizer on the table after I hugged her. I remembered. Not in anger but in clarity. Because when people laugh at you long enough, their voices start to echo. You hear them even when they're not there, and you start to believe they're right. But I'd had one voice louder than theirs. Grandpa's. And, even in his absence, he hadn't gone quiet. Earlier that day, I found a letter slipped under my door. It was sealed in thick cream paper with my name just, Haley, in his handwriting. Inside, a note. Kiddo, I knew they'd try to make you feel small again. That's how they keep their chairs high. But don't let kindness become your chain. You've always been strong enough to stand in mud and still see beauty. I pressed the paper to my chest and closed my eyes. They'd laughed. They'd scoffed. They'd tried to bury me in shame. But I hadn't just endured. I'd listened to the silences, to the shifts, to the truth beneath the perfume and pearls. And now? Now they were the ones unsure of their footing. 3 months later, I stood at the edge of the same pasture, where Grandpa once taught me how to mend a fence with baling wire and grit. The wind carried the scent of damp hay and early clover, the smell of home, not humiliation. The estate had changed, but not in the way they feared. I didn't tear down the house. I didn't convert the fields into condos or pave over the garden. I let it breathe. I let it heal. The first thing I did? Reinstate the field workers and support staff. The ones who'd stayed silent for decades while relatives rolled up in convertibles and offered tips like nobles dropping coins. I doubled their salaries. Then I reached out to the Agricultural Youth Foundation, the very one Grandpa used to donate to anonymously, and turned the old hay barn into a community learning center. Every Saturday, teens from rural schools came to learn how to grow things again, with their hands, with pride. They called it the Quiet Academy. I didn't come up with the name. One of the kids did. But I kept it. In the main house, the walls once lined with paintings of fox hunts and oil portraits now bore frames of sketches, photos, and ink prints donated by kids from the program, kids who had never seen their work in a gallery before. The grand dining hall? Now used for monthly meals with local families and seniors, real food, potluck style, with laughter louder than any violin quartet ever played in that room. People started calling me Miss Thompson, with a smile. Not because I asked for it, but because I earned it. The family? They stayed quiet. For a while. I'd received a card in the mail from Aunt Karen, generic, mass-printed, signed only with a typed, "Wishing you well." It smelled faintly of regret, and Chanel No. 5. I didn't answer. Instead, I posted a photo from the first student showcase, a girl named Maya, holding a tomato plant she'd grown from seed. Her hands were covered in soil. Her grin could have lit up the whole estate. That post went viral. Not because of the story, but because people recognized something rare. Truth in dirt. At the next town council meeting, the mayor asked if I wanted to be considered for the Agricultural Development Board. I said I'd think about it and then went back to mucking out a pen because the goats didn't care about titles. And somewhere in all of that, beneath the weight of responsibility and memory, I felt him. Grandpa. In the soil. In the laughter. In the fact that no one asked me if I smelled like pig manure anymore. Because now, I smelled like leadership. It came in a thick cream envelope. The kind they used for wedding invitations or legal summons. The return address was embossed with gold, the family estate's old crest, complete with its soaring eagle and Latin motto no one could ever translate. Inside, the card read, "You are cordially invited to the Thompson family gathering, a time for reconnection, healing, and remembrance." No signature, no handwritten note, just a photo slipped inside. Alexis holding a mimosa near the fireplace, Aunt Karen mid-smile, Uncle Todd in a blazer at least one size too small. They looked like stock images for a wine brand. And like always, I wasn't in the picture. I stared at it for a long moment. Then walked over to the drawer where I kept Grandpa's letters. At the very bottom was the oldest one, the first he'd written me after Grandma died. It was just one line. "Build something that speaks louder than you ever could." So I picked up a pen. Not to reply, but to finish the card. Across the photo, in the quiet space between Alexis's fake smile and Aunt Karen's tilted glass, I wrote, "I was never missing, you just never looked." I slipped the photo back into the envelope. No return address. No note. Just sent. Let the silence answer them for once. The following week, I opened the new community gallery we'd converted from Grandpa's tractor shed. People from 3 counties showed up, not because of the name, but because they'd heard something real was happening in this place. In the back corner was my own piece. A watercolor. A pair of old work boots resting on a porch step. One boot was slightly tilted, dirt caked into the sole. Underneath, the title read, "Worth, Unearthed." I didn't wait for the reviews. I stepped out the side door into the crisp fall wind, the scent of soil and wood smoke curling around me. No scarf, no makeup, just me. And you know what? For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the girl who had something to prove. I felt like the woman who had already built it with blistered palms, stained shirts, and all. With dirt still under her fingernails.